Welcome to KeepITRealStudios, the only channel on YouTube that keeps it real.
When watching the UFC, it's easy to get caught up in the thrill and agony of it. The UFC is filled with epic fights, amazing title changes, and just highlight real knockouts for the ages. Sometimes it's easy as viewers to forget some of the spectacles and performance that we're witnessing. And that leads me to the topic of today's video. I'm going to be diving into some of the most underrated wins in the recent UFC history. Before I get into my list, I want to make a quick little disclaimer. While making this video, I thought relatively there were so many amazing underrated wins out there. So to make it more interesting, I thought I'd have my own spin to it. Starting off, each fight on this list is going to be a title fight. This also includes interim champions too as well. Number 2, this fight is going to be in recent years. So any fight that happened before 2020 will not be on this list. And last but not least, every single fight on this list had to have ended in a finish. So if it went all the way to a decision, that fight would not be on this list. With that being said, let's get straight into the video. First fight on the list would have to go to Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns at UFC 258. This fight has everything, from an interesting backstory to two tremendous fighters and just a world-class athletes at their prime. At this point in time, Usman and Gilbert Burns were former teammates turned rival, but Burns knew that he was the one that could stop the Nigerian nightmare. When it came down to the fight, it was an absolute war, especially in the first round. Burns looked phenomenal, actually rocked Usman early with a huge over right hand and just kept putting the pressure on him. What made this fight truly tremendous is, as the fight wore on, Usman had the best mid-fight adjustments we've seen in a long time. He switched stances, utilized his footwork, his distance management, and implemented his jab tremendously well on Dorino. Eventually, took him down and landed brutal ground and pounds to obtain the victory. Kamaru Usman was truly a beast when he was the welterweight champion of the world. When we look at his legacy, a lot of people like to talk about his wars with Kobe Covington or just him knocking out Masvidal. But I truly believe that one of Usman's best performances came on that night when he defeated Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is no joke. When he was in his prime, he was an absolute beast, knocking out and stopping any single opponent that came in his tracks. It breaks my heart that a lot of people only know Gilbert Burns for his war with Shamaev, but this guy was an absolute maniac, and whoever stepped in the octagon with him was in for a rude awakening. And this fight truly proved it to the world. Usman and Gilbert put on a performance. You could tell that it meant a lot to both fighters. Gilbert Burns was shaken up after the loss. Even Usman was shaken up after the victory. However, still a tremendous matchup, and I recommend you to go look back on it. Sergei Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall, UFC 295. When it comes down to it, there's no division scarier and more brutal than the heavyweight division. And at UFC 295, John Jones was supposed to defend his championship up against Stipe Miocic, but unfortunately, due to injury, he did have to pull out. And on last minute, the UFC decided to have an interim title fight between Tom Aspinall and Sergei Pavlovich. At this point in time, Sergei Pavlovich was one of the most scariest heavyweights on the planet. He was coming off 6 first-round knockout finishes. Sergei Pavlovich was truly a monster. Fans used to refer to him as the Russian Francis Ngannou or the heavyweight Dustin Poirier. Truly one of the scariest words I've ever heard in my life. On the day of the fight, Tom Aspinall and Sergei Pavlovich stepped in, showing mutual respect towards each other, but were ready to put on a war. This fight was quick and easy. Sergei did tag Tom Aspinall early on, but Tom Aspinall stayed composed, agile, and alert as the fight went on. Tom Aspinall was doing some lower leg kicks, setting up some feints here and there, and eventually he stepped in with a 1-2, knocking down the beast, doing some follow-up shots, then knocked him out. This was truly a statement piece. Before this fight happened, the whole world truly didn't know about Tom Aspinall's amazing capabilities in the octagon. He'd already had some tremendous victories, but ever since he knocked out Pavlovich, the world truly knew who he was, and ever since that day, people have been wanting to see him go up against John Jones to prove who's the best heavyweight on the planet. Overall, I believe this is an underrated win for Tom Aspinall because I don't hear that much people talking about it. And just the way he put out Pavlovich was truly insane. His speed, his timing, his precision, just everything about Tom Aspinall in that fight truly came out to light that day. Yair Rodríguez versus Alexander Volkanovski, UFC 290. At this point in time, Alexander Volkanovski was one of the pound-for-pound best in the world. And he was just coming off a loss to Islam Makhachev after he was trying to attempt double champion status. So since he moved back down to 145, everybody was wondering how he was going to fare against Yair Rodríguez, the current interim champion, a fighter with dangerous kicks and unpredictable striking in the octagon. When it came down to the fight, Volkanovski showed to the world that he's still the best. He dismantled Yair with pressure, wrestling, and just brutal ground and pound. Took him down multiple times, showed no fear, walked through his shots, and just implemented his style, grappling, and just overwhelming pressure on Yair. You could see throughout the fights, Yair began to fatigue. Volkanovski ended up getting the finish in the third round with relentless shots. At this point in time, Alexander Volkanovski was already one of the best fighters in the world, and he just proved it once again up against a dangerous opponent like Yair. What makes this fight so underrated to me is because how easily a fighter like Volk destroyed Yair. Say what you want to say about Yair, but he's no easy task. He's a very unpredictable, wild striker. And at this point in time, Volkanovski was coming off an interesting loss, and a lot of people didn't know how he was going to fare returning back down to the featherweight division. But it seemed nothing has changed. If anything, Volk was hungrier, faster, more calculated, and better. This was a very interesting matchup, because I feel like when you look throughout Volkanovski's fights, title runs, people like to talk about his Holloway victory, him escaping the Brian Ortega choke and beating Ortega, going up to fight Islam Makhachev, having wars with Diego Lopez, but no one wants to talk about him dismantling Yair in every single aspect of the sport. Alexander the Great is truly one of the greatest featherweights on the planet. Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley, UFC 292. At this point in time, Aljamain Sterling was the champion in the bantamweight division, and he already had amazing wins over fighters like Sandhagen, Peter Yan, TJ Dillashaw, and Harry Cejudo. And at this point in time, Sean O'Malley was still kind of a rising contender. He had a lot of hype around him. He was in the Dana White Contender Series. He had a lot of highlights in the octagon. And he was coming up with a controversial victory up against Peter Yan. So heading into this fight, a lot of people didn't have that much faith in him. A lot of people were truly questioning his abilities in the UFC. And on the day of the fight, it started off relatively very interesting. Not much went on in the first round, but you could definitely see the champion Sterling pushing the pace. You know, trying to get him up against the cage, trying to get some takedowns. But Sean O'Malley stayed patient, calm, circled around the cage, implemented some kicks to maintain the distance. But when we got into the second round, that's when things truly changed. Aljamain Sterling decided to rush in on Sean O'Malley, but Sean O'Malley was ready for that moment. He slipped back and landed a nasty right hand that knocked down the champ. Then he followed up with some brutal ground and pounds, then eventually became the bantamweight champion of the world. Sean O'Malley truly shocked the world that night. He proved that the hype was real and he was here to stay in the bantamweight division. Going into this fight, a lot of people doubted him. No one really thought he could beat Aljo, and I don't even blame them. Looking at their resume, looking at their styles, it did look like Sean O'Malley was outgunned. And even in the lead up to the fight, Sean O'Malley did state that he was injured. So it did look like the odds were in Aljo's favor. But when it came down to it, the Sugar Show still proved that he was on top of the world and one of the best bantamweights in the division. Truly a one-of-a-kind performance that will be remembered for a lifetime. Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje, UFC 274. In the lead up to this fight, there was a controversial moment that went down in the weigh-ins. Charles Oliveira unfortunately didn't make weight, so the UFC decided to strip him of his lightweight championship, and only Justin Gaethje was eligible to win the championship if he beat Charles Oliveira. This was truly a shocking moment. This is something that will really affect anybody, especially a champion, going up into a huge fight. And everybody thought that this was going to be the downfall of Charles Oliveira because this was a huge mental battle that he had to overcome, and not that many people thought he could overcome it. On the day of the fight, Charles Oliveira proved that he was ready for war. He was marching down Justin Gaethje like nothing. The first shot that he landed on Gaethje wobbled him instantly. Charles Oliveira was walking him down. He did not care what shots were coming at him. Justin Gaethje rocked him multiple times, but Charles Oliveira went on his back, showing that he was ready to take this fight to the ground. Charles Oliveira on that night was a man possessed, a man ready to hunt down anybody that stepped foot in his path. He rocked Justin Gaethje, got him down, went from the back, and choked him out. Charles Oliveira proved to the world that whether or not he had the belt, the champ had a name, and the name was Charles Oliveira. To me, I believe this is a truly underrated fight because it was filled with wild action. But I feel like when it comes down to this fight, people usually just remember it as the day Charles Oliveira missed weight and lost his lightweight championship. But I remember this day as Charles Oliveira destroying Justin Gaethje in a manner that he's never been destroyed in. Charles Oliveira defeated Justin Gaethje the way Justin Gaethje defeats his own opponents. Charles Oliveira defeated Justin Gaethje in a way no other opponent has too as well. Charles Oliveira was the man that night. I truly believe on that night, nobody could have stopped Charles Oliveira. He was ready for war and he was coming for blood. To me, this is not only the most underrated title fights, but one of the best first-rounded fights in UFC history. In overall conclusion, I truly believe that these underrated wins showed grit, brilliance, and championship-level composure. Whether they were forgotten because of timing, bigger headlines, or just short-term memory, I truly believe that each fighter on the card, whether they won or lost, truly showcased something that night for fans to remember. And that's why I had to talk about them today. I truly believe that there's so many title fights out there that are truly underrated and unappreciated as time goes on. So I wanted to make a video and bring it back to life. For an overall conclusion, that'd be it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Just comment down below some of your thoughts on these fights, and just comment down below some of the underrated fights that you have in mind too as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to keep it real.